evening, everybody. First and foremost, of course, my warm welcome and thanks to the organizers of the Croatian School and everybody who has been participating in organizing this event. For me, it's always a pleasure to be part of any kind of lectures for the graduates, for postgraduates, for MBA students, name it. I heard a lot of stories about Anthony, and now he proved to be, or at least vast majority of these stories proved to be correct. So he's a really exceptional teacher and professor. You said at the beginning he's standing in a dark blue or blue. Okay, no, he's Everton fan. So I'm for sure there. I was supposed to be in a white corner, not red one. So we heard, I would say, quite interesting lecture. When we have been preparing this lecture, I was asked by girls, by ladies from Croatia, which is going to be the topic. Believe me, in the area, in the environment that I live and work on a daily basis, I literally don't know what is going to happen in the next hour, not in about 1 month period. So we put something that we said current trends in Croatian economy, but I think that we can touch upon many other items or whatever you will be interested later on. Of course, that I will be asked later on when it's going to be next tax cuts and things like that. I'm two notes before I start with the presentation. So today, despite the TV camera, I'm here more as, or at least I'll try to act as an expert in this field. No big political speeches, this or that nature. And the other one, I'm always looking on the glass half full rather than half empty. However, and I don't like to talk about history too much. However, I need to start my presentation by saying this, so no any political nature of whatever in these figures, but taking into account last, let's say, almost a decade, 7-8 years, Croatian economy really suffered significantly from the recession. Should I start here? Okay, so quite significant, I would say, hit. On average, it was like more than 11% real GDP. I'm sure that all of you are very much familiarized with the concept. So the total value of products and services that one economy produces in 1 year. So in real terms, when you adjust for the changes in prices, you have a loss of 11%. On the top of that, what is even more, I would say, problematic is the drop of investment activity by 1/3 of real value. Construction work, you know that before the recession, maybe it's more for Anthony and people who are maybe not that familiar with Croatian economy, but before the recession we had growth that was predominantly driven by the domestic demand, by the private consumption, but then heavily stimulated by investment activity, particularly in the road infrastructure and real estate infrastructure. So construction actually boomed, one would say even ballooned before the recession. And then we saw a significant drop throughout this period. Obviously, all the other macroeconomic indicators, but I would say always for me, that's maybe one link to my also period of education in US. You know that in US, they are following GDP figures, they are following inflation, they are following other macroeconomic indicators, but number one indicator that they are following is actually employment, and that is the critical element. So according to these statistics, we lost like 10%, and you know that with the statistics of unemployment, employment, you always have adjustments, you have always, unfortunately, people who also left country, etc. That's why I use this employment as an indicator. On the top of that, I need also to back up my current position and to talk about public finances. As a result of decline of economic activity, it's a direct link to your revenue collection, which dropped. At the same time, you know that politically it's always sensitive to do something with your budget because there are always certain elections on the horizon. However, result of all what was happening in our country was a significant widening of our deficit, which means difference between revenues and expenditures. And you can see that there are, I would say, years on average 5.5, almost to 6% of GDP. That's really high. That's really high. And as a result of that, even more, I would say, or better indicator, is this line trend of the public debt. Public debt is when you calculate all your deficits, actually, at the end of the day. So how much the country, the state, owes to domestic or to international, whoever, total value of it. So you can see that there were years where we were in this so famous Maastricht criteria, below 60%, so I remember this time 30+% of GDP, but it went in some years, you can see even exponentially, to the levels close to 87%. So these are two main macroeconomic, and then plus, there is unfortunately one additional plus, and that's demographics. So trends, this is upper part of the chart, is something that is, I would say, not only specificity of Croatia. We are seeing it in many other countries of European Union, Europe, aging of population and a very negative, I would say, demographic trends. So you have a constant negative balance deficit between newborn and died people. And you can see that it was even, I would say, slightly, unfortunately, improving, or I would say worsening throughout the period. And the below part, you can see also, that we have once in 10 years we have a national census, but on a yearly basis we do some kind of a projections on the population of Croatia, and as a result of additional, I would say, demographic challenge that appeared to be very strong last few years, and that's migration and immigration, I would say, we are seeing even reduction of the number of Croatians in Croatia, so population is also declining. So by having this rather, I would say, three not very nice and pleasant charts, one would ask the question, what is the topic in your country? What is the main topic to discuss? I have been going through many financial centers, London, New York, East Coast, West Coast, all over Europe. Wherever you sit and talk to the financial or real sector investor, there are two main questions. And there are questions always on this, on GDP, on the growth, on employment, and on this, on public finances. So quite simple two questions, but answer maybe not that simple. So what I'm going to talk is actually how we, again, I need to say, since still I'm finance minister, at least still, as I said, so on a daily basis they are changing my position, so I don't know what it's going to be tomorrow. However, today I am still finance minister, yes, and of course as well. I'm going to talk also about public finances. So, government program, you need to hear a bit of it. But linking back or coming back to Anthony's presentation, you saw this nice chart on the competitiveness, you saw different levels or different levers of it, and you saw that there is also some kind of a monetary fiscal policy, and there is also some kind of a macro environment. At the end of the day, the question lies, or at least appears to be, what the state can or is supposed, I would say, at the end of the day, to do. So government is always having some program, so we need to have a program, at least, to put some kind of actions, plans, this or that. But at the end of the day, what are the two, from my perspective, from my point of view, or at least my opinion, what are the two main, I would say, areas where the government needs to do, particularly in a country as Croatia is? On one hand, to do whatever it can do in order to stimulate business environment, climate, and to set up some kind of infrastructure for business to do and to perform well. And on the other hand, to keep an eye and control over its own finances and not to put additional burden on the economy by having enormous deficit, debts, etc., etc. So this is in a nutshell. I'll try to go and to maybe elaborate a bit more on each of these. In terms of the growth well, I was asked December last year, historically highest growth rate of industrial production. It's really huge number, 14.9%. So on comparing December 2016 with December 2015. And I was asked by journalists who is supposed to be like a main reason for that, or at least who are we supposed to thank? Obviously to the economy, to the entrepreneurs, to the, at the end of the day, real sector. Government, okay, of course, we also have certain, let's say, at least interventions into it, and we are also contributing to this growth, but at the end of the day, it's the economy who is showing these results. Again, we are supposed to, at least finally, realize which are the main drivers of our growth. When I saw the beginning, or at least agenda for Anthony's presentation, I was a bit afraid when I saw shipbuilding industry, because I have a lot of headaches in the past on the shipbuilding, but you presented a very nice example of shipbuilding industry, small size boats and ships across the Atlantic coast. I was afraid that you are going to talk about big shipbuilding industry, which was an issue in Croatia. So tourism, of course, is something that we are having. Michael Porter would maybe correct me if I'm wrong in describing, but definitely an activity where we do have some kind of and competitive advantage and some strengths, particularly in the last couple of years when many other, I would say, trends in a geopolitical, in overall environment is, I would say, to be honest, assisting and helping us. But we need to further strengthen and improve our tourism. I personally believe that there is a huge maneuver space to improve. Our season is still too short. The average per capita spending in Croatia comparing to the rest of the, let's call it, Adriatic area or Mediterranean area is well below, I would say, competitors. On the other hand, of course, industry. But again, when we are talking about industry, one would always ask which kind of industry. We are in the building. Before coming here, I was imprisoned by the management board of this company, which is owning this building. They are in the IT sector, and I think that IT is definitely one of the industries that Croatia can and must, at the end of the day, show much more than so far. There are other, I would say, elements of the industry which we need to strengthen, but at least, and I think that in your presentation it was also quite clear, we need finally to make some kind of distinctions between industries that can be drivers and maybe industries that can't at the end of the day. Agriculture, we do have pretty much everything that we need for the agriculture. We lack investment, we lack maybe some other things, and we all know that with the agriculture, returns on your investment are very slow, and it takes quite a long period of time to get it back. However, so what the government can do in order to, let's call it, stimulate and boost growth in various activities, I put here one term that later on in the presentation you will also hear, and we say activation of currently inactive or dormant state assets. And believe me, in Croatia, like in many other countries, to use the word privatization, that's horrible. That's not very nice or smart move to do. That's why we are using this activation of state assets. But I am talking about activation of state assets in a really broad sense, because on the top of a significant number of companies, state-owned companies, where we are having full majority or minority stakes, we do have, believe me or not, we have significant number. We are talking about 4,000 plus real estate units, from individual real estate properties, flats, this or that nature, all down to the former military facilities. Croatia was part of the former country which invested heavily in the military. Now many people are forcing me again to reinvest in the military, and I'm opposing to that. So, on the other hand, also touristic leisure facilities. Not that we have been building these leisure facilities, but they have been going through the various periods of different kinds of changes of ownership, but eventually they always ended up with the debts towards the government because of the tax and the other, let's say, obligations, and debt to equity swap. The country and the state ended up with them. So what is the, and again, let's link this last topic of the currently in active state with, for instance, tourism. I know, reading through some of the materials on your webpage, that there are people here coming from various companies like Valamar, Maestra, and the likes, who have been, I would say, leading the investment cycles in last 2 years. And what is, on the one hand, their appetite to invest, of course, their financial and business strength to do that, but at the same time, government can also and is supposed to participate, obviously, but activating this currently dormant capital. We are talking about dozens of touristic hotels on the coast, which are today, I would say, underinvested, poorly managed, loss-making, at the end of the day, not bringing any value, but more as a burden. With a strategic partner, with the companies of the nature that I mentioned, or many others who are supposed to come as well in Croatia and invest, we are bringing new capital, we are bringing investment, we are bringing employment, and the value creation not only for this particular, I would say, asset, but for the whole micro location. And we can go through various, I would say, examples of this nature. You mentioned in your presentation business environment and our ranking on the doing business. We are now currently 47th ranking country in the world. I remember time when we have been 122nd. That was at the beginning when doing business started. Doing business is an, I don't know if you are familiar, but this is obviously very important survey. However, it's predominantly done on soft indicators. So there, experts come to Croatia, and then they go to various institutions like lawyers, like I don't know, some representatives of entrepreneurs, trade unions, and the likes, and they interview them. And what is their sense? And if you come and visit them on Friday afternoon, together with the other aspect, they always ranked and say that Croatia, for instance, for getting some kind of a permit, it takes you 700 days or something. And as a result of that, we have a quite bad, let's say, ranking and position. However, we are definitely planning to improve on that, because we saw that this is really an important indicator, because any international investor, of course, they will go for some kind of internationally comparable database, where to put yourself, country as Croatia is, with the other countries. And doing business is among those that they are taking. One of the things that we also want, even in the short run, to improve, particularly on the business climate and in environment, is so-called parafiscal charges. This is one topic that I think surprised many when we, like 8 or 9 years ago, finally collected them all and put them on one database, in realizing that at that time we counted 300 plus different kinds of parafiscal charges. But when you go individually from one to the other, then you realize that many of those, they don't have any kind of purpose, and we simply don't know what is the rationale behind it. But at the end of the day, it's a financial burden for the companies, but it's also administrative burden, because somebody in SME company, in a large company, or whatever company needs to deal with it. So definitely a clear conclusion, or I would say suggestion, is let's go also with these reductions. One thing that, of course, myself personally is very proud of, and I would say only in superlatives, is on the tax reforms, what we did. So the government and the parliament adopted, and it's now active. But my point is, we do have issues with the public debt, with the deficit. However, my view is that the secret or the key of success of these public finances lie on the expenditure side. So you need to keep control on the expenditure side. I can speak a bit of it. I'm sure that you are familiarized that when you count pensions, healthcare, wages, salaries, interest payments, I'm already at 80% of our budget, 4 items. So really little or on tiny maneuver space. However, let's keep control over expenditure side. At the same time, the key of success, if we can talk about success, is on the revenue side. So revenues are supposed to be used for the deficit and debt reduction, and also for the tax reduction, or at least for the overall relaxation of the entrepreneurs, of the real sector, but also of the citizens. And that was actually one of the, let's say, main hypotheses when we started on working on one big project, which we called tax reform because it was 15 laws plus 30 plus bylaws. Usually people think when somebody, or at least parliament, votes in favor of the law, then that is it. 15 laws, that's huge number. However, you need also to implement and to work on the operational legislation, which means bylaws, different kind of government and ministers' bylaws and documents. So this was a huge project which we did like 6-7 months, really heavy work with a lot of experts, tax experts, macro experts, finance people, etc. And we created one comprehensive set of changes in order, on one hand, I'll start with this, to create something that we believe is very important for the investment and for the entrepreneurs, and that is one stable tax system, but also not only stable, but predictable system that even if the next change will appear eventually, will be in line with the previous one. Not the case that we had before, that you constantly have too many changes and interventions in the tax system, but eventually you start with a tax reduction, then when you lack some money in the budget, then you increase other taxes, so different directions. So predictability and stability, that's one of the key. I saw one survey of the foreign investments and foreign investors. They graded stability of judiciary system and a tax system even more important than corruption. Some of them said that we can deal with corruption, but with this we can't. Obviously, that's an interesting conclusion. However, stability and predictability, I would say, is important. For me, very important as a finance minister is also to create simplicity in the tax system. From both sides, I would say, and your side and my side, so and the dark blue and the white corner side. Because on one side, you have simplicity in order to attract investment, to ease doing business, to create this positive business environment. From my side, it's actually to ease doing business of my tax administration. I, as a finance minister, would be very, very glad if my tax administration would be capable of releasing, let's call it, legally binding opinion. That's a document in any, let's say, old member states of European Union that are comparable to us, like Austria, like Belgium or Netherlands. You go to the tax administration, I have my personal experience in that. You ask for one specific request and you get answer from the tax administration and it's legally binding. Unfortunately, in this situation, at the current moment, I can't guarantee you this because this is practically impossible when you have too many of these, I would say, complexity, too much of this complexity into the tax system. So simplicity is very important. But at the same time, very important is competitiveness. You spoke about competitiveness. I intentionally won't talk too much in my presentation. Later on, if you will have questions, today I got too many questions on the monetary policy and on the depreciation of our currency, but competitiveness you can gain also on this particular field. We calculated in our projections maximum amount for year one that we can relieve and release, I would say, in terms of the tax reduction in order to stimulate growth, but at the same time not to jeopardize public finances, I would say, sustainability. That's the amount of approximately 0.7% of GDP, which in accordance with empirical evidences, OECD, IMF and the likes, the other countries are showing that reduction of the share of taxes in GDP are directly improving not only 1 year, but I would say long-term potential growth of your economy. And one of the key issues and challenges of our economy is not current momentum. We are currently having 3.2% growth, roughly. Let's say 3 plus area. But potential growth of Croatian economy is quite weak. And that is the main challenge, because we are not seeing only 2017, we are looking to 2020, we are looking to 2030, etc., etc. So this is one of the direct, I would say, implications to the improvement of the potential growth. However, again, sustainability of public finances is by no means I would never propose to my government, to parliament, anything that would jeopardize the public finances. I have been working with the Minister of Finance for many years. I remember a time when we have been having revenues, let's say some kind of a review where we are seeing, and we have been seeing two-digit growth rates, VAT rising 13% yearly basis, personal income tax, corporate income tax. But I also remember very much a period of recession where everything was in red. So nor dark blue nor white, but literally in red. You have this experience, and with the trend and with the chart that we saw at the beginning, I don't see any alternatives that we need to continue with the reduction of deficit. We ended up 2016 really exceptionally well. Our original plan was 2.6% of GDP. We ended up strongly inside 2%, which is roughly 3 billion kunas lower than expected, which is great. Lower deficit means lower level and your needs for the financing, which means lower debt. However, for 2017, we are planning pretty much the same level of deficit of around 1.6%, but further reduction of deficit to 1% and 2.6%. What is the total amount? Anybody can tell me. What is the total amount of interest payment that the state budget is paying on a yearly basis? In interest payments to the public debt. 12 billion kunas. 12 billion kunas. Billions are really huge numbers. 12 billion kunas. It's actually the total budget of the Ministry of Education. So when you calculate everything from the preschool, school, high school, faculty, professors, when you calculate their salaries, material costs and everything, the whole budget of the Ministry of Education and Science is slightly lower than these 12 billion kunas. Huge.
What are the projections of increase in interest costs in 2020?
I'll come to that one, just to complete. So this particular figure, this is a total deficit, general government deficit. This is ESA 2010. For some of you who are maybe interested, more technical, but fully comparable with the other countries. So comparing Croatia to Netherlands, Germany, or okay, you are no longer in with Denmark, so it's fully comparable. It's fully comparable number. But this 1.6 for this year, this is the total deficit, and you have part of the total deficit also interest payments. When you deduct interest payments, because this is your current expenditure, but for the past time debt, you are calculating the so-called primary balance. Primary balance, so your current revenues, current expenditures. Croatia is actually in surplus of 2%, because this 12 billion kunas of interest payments, it is 3.5% of GDP, and it's huge. In terms of the predictions and projections, on the further, I'll cover this part when I'll talk about public debt. So this is definitely something that we don't see as alternative. At the same time, last week on our government session, we adopted one document. Document is a document, but the essence is important, and that's so-called public debt management strategy. There are three main pillars of how we are seeing reduction of the public debt in GDP. On one hand is this economic growth that I have been talking about. At the same time, this fiscal consolidation that I was also showing you on the previous slide, and this is my favorite topic, activation of state assets. So these three are supposed to act jointly in order not only to stabilize, but also to reduce public debt in GDP. One thing that I need to say, and this is more thanks to my team in the Ministry of Finance and the government, but in 2016, it was the first year in our history that we managed to reduce the share of public debt in GDP. And as a result of that, you have these projections. So the first part of the chart you saw, this growth all down or up, all up to 86.7% end of 2015. Last year we managed to reduce this public debt and further going down to 75. This is a base case. Base case. One of the key risks to this, let's say, projection lie on each of the segments that I previously said. So if the growth growth will be slower than expected, if the fiscal consolidation will be different or worse than expected, or if we will not be that successful with the activation. On the top of that, you have the element that he was talking, and that is a global environment. Currently, today, we do have actually, honestly, one thing that you can't explain through the academic approach or whatever. So Croatia today is paying lower interest rates and yields than when we have been in the investment grade. Today we are 2 notches below investment grade. So what is the reason for that? Nothing to do, well, with us, of course, but predominantly with the foreign international markets. Simply because there is a huge level of liquidity in ECB still pumping in the system. Okay, Fed stopped with that. They started with the rise of the interest payments, but at least for this, let's say, 12 months horizon, we can count that without some major exogenous shocks, that these levels will remain. By no means these interest or yield levels are going to rise. So this is another, I wouldn't call it risk, but something that you need to take into account. And that's why you need to address this topic rather sooner than later. Because tomorrow, when the pressure will be more, then obviously it's much better than your financing/refinancing needs are lower. And that's actually the main idea why we are seeing this public debt. Usually people are linking this to the euro adoption, to our economy, a highly euroized economy. But this topic I wouldn't open now, later if you want, fine. But generally, this is not reduction of public debt just to fulfill this Maastricht criteria. Who knows what is going to happen with the Maastricht criteria in years to come. However, this is a quite steady declining trend, and that is something what we believe is needed. So, for the conclusion, I would say that government and the state, again, coming back to my original point, there are 2 main fields where you can act. On one hand is for sure creating infrastructure, business environment, everything that is needed just to let business environment, real sector, and everybody to work, to invest, to employ their capital, but at the same time to keep control on their public finances. I put here something that is also important to stress, because after 2007, in last month and a half, we finally got some at least good news from the rating agencies. So Croatia, from its inception, so when we been awarded with the credit rating, it was back in 1998. We have been investment grade, BBB-, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, with Moody's different, letters and numbers, however, investment grade. So throughout the whole period, until 2012, we have been keeping this investment grade, and then two times we have been downgraded, so 2 notches below investment grade. This is important because, as is the case with the Doing Business report, this is something that the markets are looking, investors, etc. So it is influencing the cost of funding for the state, but directly and indirectly cost of funding for the entrepreneurs and eventually for the households. That's why we strongly believe that this is also one of the priorities for us, not only to remain on this, I would say, rather good news that we had in the last 2 months or month and a half, that finally rating agencies stabilize the outlook of our rating, but that we need to improve and to come back to the investment grade. So sustainability of public finances by no means is also our priority. So I'll stop here, hopefully in line with the expectations, and of course open for your questions, if any.